Monsters in Plain Sight. The true crime story of Charles Thorne's hidden bunker and the survivors who escaped. It all started with whispers, quiet ones, the kind that creep through neighborhoods with manicured lawns and motion sensor gates. Folks in the upscale hills of Marin County talked, not loud, just enough to share side eyes at dinner parties and clink their wine glasses a little harder. They spoke of the Thorne estate. Not because of its beauty, though yeah, it was a stunner, but because of the mystery that clung to it like ivy on its stone walls. Charles Thorne wasn't your average rich guy. Sure, he had money, old money, trust funds since diapers, but he had something else too. That air. That unsettling calm people mistake for charm, but it's really control. The kind of control that turns a dinner guest into a disciple and a worker into a shadow. Charles kept to himself. People assumed he liked privacy. But privacy, in his case, wasn't about solitude. It was about secrets. Dark ones. The estate was massive, 10 bedrooms, a pool the size of a community center, and land that stretched beyond the tree line. But what nobody saw was what lay underneath. A custom-built bunker, designed under the guise of doomsday prepping. Except it wasn't stocked with canned goods or emergency radios. It had cells. Real ones. Reinforced doors. No windows. And cameras, so many damn cameras. Nobody knew the truth until Emily Rivera vanished. Emily was 23, Filipino-American, and a nursing student hustling through college. She picked up house-cleaning gigs through an app. She was bright, funny, had a laugh that made people feel warm. She told her sister she landed a high-paying private gig in Marin, said it felt too good to be true. She was right. She went to work on a Thursday. Never came back. Her sister, Jackie, called her phone for days. No answer. She went to the cops, but you know how that goes. A grown woman? She probably ran off. Maybe she met someone. Maybe she just needed space. It wasn't until Jackie plastered social media with Emily's face that anyone really started paying attention. That's when the pieces started unraveling. Emily wasn't the first. There were others. Lucy Tran, Andre Miller, Miranda Gomez. All domestic workers. All disappeared from different cities, different years, but with one strange link. They all had worked temporary cleaning or caregiver jobs near or in the Bay Area. Nobody had made the connection. Not until Jackie started digging and made noise loud enough that someone finally looked deeper. Lucy was a straight-A student from Oakland trying to pay for her little brother's asthma meds. Andre, a laid-back dude from Vallejo, did handyman jobs while pursuing photography. Miranda had come from Texas chasing a better life, left her whole world behind, just to end up God knows where. That's the thing with folks living paycheck to paycheck. When they disappear, the world doesn't stop spinning. Cops don't rush. News doesn't cover it. People barely blink. Until someone screamed loud enough. The police finally got a warrant, mostly out of public pressure. They showed up at the Thorne estate with body cams and warrants, expecting, who knows what. Maybe nothing. Maybe just a rich creep with weird habits. What they found? It was the stuff of nightmares. The place was pristine on the surface. Polished floors, marble countertops, staff that smiled too much. But in the study, behind a bookcase, they found a panel. Hidden but not impossible. Inside, an elevator shaft leading underground. No one without the code could get in. They pried it open, went down. It was cold. Concrete walls, fluorescent lights, stale air. The hallway split into two. On the left, security monitors, wires, surveillance, like a control room from a prison. On the right, locked doors. Heavy ones. Each one with a small window, covered in scratches. Behind one of them, they found Emily. She was bruised, half-starved, but alive. Wrapped in a dirty blanket, curled in a corner like a scared animal. She didn't speak at first. Just stared, wide-eyed, like she didn't believe what she was seeing. Like she'd forgotten what rescue felt like. The others? Lucy and Miranda were there too, barely conscious. Andre, he wasn't so lucky. They found his body in a makeshift medical room, hooked up to IVs. Tubes coming out of him like some twisted science experiment. The coroner would later say he'd been dead for weeks, organ failure, likely from prolonged drugging and dehydration. But what was worse was the notes. Thorne had journals, files, detailed logs on each subject. He treated them like test rats, recorded everything, what they ate, how they reacted to isolation, even when they cried. He called it emotional mapping, wrote about breaking the soul in stages. The cops tried to process it, but how do you wrap your head around that kind of evil? Emily, when she was finally able to speak, said he never yelled, never hit them. He just like a therapist. Said things like, "The world forgot you, but I see you," or "You're safe now, no more outside lies." He'd feed them sometimes. Other times, he'd let them starve. It was all part of the mapping. Control the body to own the mind. He told them they were special, that he was building a community for survivors, those hurt by the world. A place where rules were real, where obedience was love. She said at first, it almost made sense. He'd talk for hours, make you question everything you knew. But then the lights would go out, the food would stop, and the screams would echo through the vents. They weren't alone. Not always. Other victims came and went. Short stays. Disposable, maybe. Some weren't even given names, just initials in his logs. One girl, Aral, was mentioned in frantic scribbles about resistance and necessary disposal. They never found her. The media had a field day. Billionaire's House of Horror. The Monster of Marin. But none of it scratched the surface. Not really, because Thorne wasn't just rich. He was connected. Politicians, tech giants, charity boards. He hosted galas with the same hands that locked people in cages. It took weeks before he was officially arrested. Rumors said he tried to cut a deal, offer names, favors, silence. But public outcry was too loud. Too many eyes watching. He sat in court like a statue. No emotion. No apologies. His lawyer painted him as mentally unwell, a trauma victim himself. They tried to spin it like he was researching isolation, experimenting to understand his own childhood abuse. But no excuse could cover what he did. The jury didn't blink. Life sentence. No parole. Emily testified. Voice shaking, hands trembling. She said she still hears the door lock every time she tries to sleep. That even free, she doesn't feel free. Lucy had to be hospitalized for months. PTSD, malnutrition. Miranda? She hasn't spoken since. Jackie started a foundation. For exploited workers, trafficking victims, the invisible ones. She said if the system won't watch out for them, she will. The house? Condemned. No one wants it. Some say it's cursed. Others say it should be burned to the ground. Either way, it stands there still, silent, like it's waiting. Because monsters don't always look like monsters. Sometimes they wear suits. They smile for cameras. They host fundraisers and sip champagne with mayors. And sometimes they live right next door. What freaked people out wasn't just what Charles Thorne did. It was how long he got away with it. Years. Maybe decades. A man that rich, that composed, living in plain sight while literally imprisoning people underground. That realization, it hit the town like a gut punch. Investigators went digging. Not just in his house, but in his life. His past. His family tree. And the deeper they went, the more twisted it all got. Charles was born into wealth, yeah, but his upbringing was far from golden. His father, Gregory Thorne, was a military contractor who made millions off foreign defense deals. Cold, calculated. Some even whispered abusive. His mother? A socialite turned recluse after a car accident that left her disfigured. She barely left the west wing of the mansion. Some reports said she hadn't spoken a word the last 10 years of her life. Charles grew up inside that house. Schooled by private tutors, servants coming and going. He barely interacted with kids his own age. There were rumors from the staff, stuff about him hurting animals, locking pets in closets, mimicking screams. They say one nanny quit after finding him watching a stray cat slowly drown in the fountain, just watching. But nobody talked too loud, because money buys silence. At 16, he was sent to a boarding school in Connecticut. Fancy one. Rich kids only. But he was expelled after 2 semesters for inappropriate psychological experiments on classmates. That was the phrasing. No charges. No real consequences. His dad paid everyone off. And Charles disappeared into tutors and therapy until college. He went to Stanford, studied psychology and human behavior, top of his class. Professors said he had a mind like a scalpel, sharp, precise, cold. He could predict people's choices before they even made them. One even said if he wanted to, Charles could have cured addiction or created cults. He chose the latter. He kept his record spotless. On paper, he was a philanthropist, donated to mental health orgs, homelessness programs, abuse shelters. But that's what pissed people off the most. He didn't just pretend to be a good guy. He marketed it, used it to lure victims. He handpicked them, watched them online, tracked their habits, only picked the vulnerable, the ones with no nearby family, no financial safety net, immigrants, runaways, the lost. Then he offered salvation, a job, a fresh start, room and board, a safe place. But once they stepped inside that estate, the world stopped hearing from them. Emily said the first week felt normal. She cleaned, cooked, stayed in the guest quarters. He was polite. Too polite. Asked questions, way too many. About her childhood, her trauma, her fears. She thought maybe he was just awkward. Rich guy weird. But then the questions became orders. And the orders became threats. And then came the drugs. Something in her tea. She'd wake up in different clothes with no memory of the night before. After a few days, she was in the bunker. Door locked. Lights humming overhead. And the only voice she heard was his, through a speaker in the ceiling. She wasn't alone. Not at first. Miranda had been there for a while. Long enough to stop speaking. She just rocked back and forth, tracing shapes on the wall with her fingers like she was writing messages only she understood. Andre was in a different cell. He'd try to talk through the vents, tell jokes, try to keep spirits up. But eventually he just stopped. Emily said the worst part wasn't the hunger, or the isolation. It was the fake kindness. He'd appear through a window once a week, smile, ask how they were doing, tell them, you're progressing. You're almost ready to return. Return to what? Nobody knew. But he'd say it like a parent talking to a child. So, encouraging. Like they were part of a study. And maybe in his mind, they were. After the rescue, the date tried to dig into who else might have been involved. I mean, there's no way he did all this alone, right? They looked at his house staff. His personal assistant, Jeffrey. The estate manager, Marla. The guards. The landscaper. Somebody had to know. And here's where it gets sicker. Marla confessed. Said she knew something was happening, but didn't know it was that. She admitted she handled food orders for downstairs, but was told it was for Thorne's experimental wellness retreat. He claimed he was studying social deprivation with full participant consent. She said she bought it. Maybe she wanted to buy it. The money was too good. But Jeffrey? He knew everything. And worse, he helped. Turns out, Jeffrey was Charles's first project. Hired 10 years ago after a failed suicide attempt. Charles had met him at a mental health fundraiser, taken him in, given him a job, a purpose. Then slowly rewired him, broke him down, built him back up. By the time authorities interviewed him, Jeffrey talked about Thorne like he was a prophet. He said things like, "The world outside is the real prison," and "Charles showed us truth." He didn't even flinch when they showed him footage of the cells. Said the subjects were chosen for salvation, that they were being purified. That's when the FBI stepped in, because now it wasn't just kidnapping. It was a potential cult. They dug into his financials, found offshore accounts, encrypted messages, even a hidden server. Turns out, Charles had been documenting everything, not just for himself, but for others. A network. Other twisted minds following his methods. A private forum where they shared behavioral conditioning results. No names, just videos, logs, blueprints for their own underground facilities. Only a few were ever identified. Somewhere in Eastern Europe, one in Arizona, one suspected in South Africa. But they'd gone dark, probably scattered once Thorne was caught. And then came the betrayal. Lucy, one of the rescued, revealed something that chilled everyone to the bone. She remembered a woman, early 30s, short black hair, glasses, coming into the bunker once, not as a prisoner, but as an observer. Took notes. Watched her cry. Then left. She said Charles called her Dr. V. Investigators matched the description to Dr. Viola Kern, a behavioral psychologist from Stanford. No criminal record. Published author. Frequent guest at Thorne's charity events. She denied everything. Lawyered up fast. But a raid on her laptop found encrypted logs that matched Thorne's journal entries. Same phrasing, same structure. She vanished before the trial. Her car was found abandoned near the Golden Gate Bridge, but her body was never recovered. Some think she faked her death. Others say she was silenced by someone higher up in the network. Either way, she was gone. By now, the public was furious. Protests outside the courthouse. People demanding accountability. Asking how a guy like Thorne could build a damn dungeon and nobody noticed. But here's the thing. People did notice. They just didn't want to believe it. Delivery drivers mentioned weird drop-offs. One plumber said he fixed a leak and saw walls too thick for a normal basement. A gardener once joked that the air near the back shed smelled like hospital bleach. Everyone had a story, but no one connected the dots. Or worse, they ignored them, because that's how monsters thrive. They count on your silence, your doubt, your fear of getting involved. After the trial, the world moved on, like it always does. Headlines faded. Reporters chased new stories. But for the survivors, it never really ended. Because when someone rewires your reality, your mind doesn't just bounce back. You carry that with you, like rust on your soul. Emily tried to go back to school. But every time she stepped into a classroom, she felt watched. Like Charles was still studying her from somewhere. Like those cameras were still on. She dropped out after 3 weeks. Moved in with her sister. Started therapy. Some days she talks. Some days she just stares at the floor. Miranda? She was moved to a trauma facility in Oregon. Refused to eat for days. Would only write in chalk, just numbers and dates. No one knew what they meant. But then one doctor realized the dates lined up with when victims disappeared. Miranda had memorized every scream she heard. And she was keeping count. Lucy took a different route. She spoke out. Went on news shows. Did podcasts. She wanted the world to hear what silence cost her. She got threats. Death threats. Anonymous messages saying, "You're next." The FBI traced one of them to an IP address linked to one of Thorne's old donors. A man named Silas Greaves. Silas was a venture capitalist. Deep pockets. Friend of Thorne. Never charged, but when they searched his vacation cabin in Idaho, they found sketches of a similar bunker. Plans. Notes. Surveillance equipment. It was like the sickness spread. Like Charles had infected people. But here's where it gets even darker. A whistleblower came forward. A nurse from a private psych hospital in Napa. She claimed a young woman had been admitted 6 months before the Thorne bust. No ID, catatonic, with evidence of prolonged confinement and chemical sedation. The hospital filed it as a Jane Doe. Nobody investigated. Turns out, it was Arl, the missing girl from Thorne's notes. Regina Langston, 19, reported missing from Fresno in 2020. Her family thought she ran off. She hadn't. She was dumped in a ditch with a forged release form and left to rot in the system. The nurse tried to go public. Her apartment was broken into a week later. Nothing stolen, just her laptop smashed, and a note left in lipstick on the mirror, "Stop digging." Cops launched an investigation. But like most of this case, it hit a wall. Too many players. Too much money. Too many closed doors. The Thorne estate became a symbol. Activists spray-painted the gates. Not a home. A cage. Urban explorers broke in, filmed footage of the underground bunker. One video showed scratch marks on the walls, like someone tried to claw their way out. Another showed tally marks, hundreds of them, scratched into the steel toilet. One mark for every day someone counted. The place was finally demolished 2 years later. Quietly. No press allowed. Just bulldozers, rubble, and a long silence. But destruction didn't kill the myth. Online forums started calling Thorne a misunderstood genius. saying he proved something about human obedience. One subreddit claimed the whole thing was staged, a government mind control experiment. Others started sharing the Thorn Protocol, a sick manual of his methods. It was banned, but like all things online, it just kept resurfacing. Charles Thorn himself never spoke again after the trial. Not one word. He sat in prison like he was still in control. Every day, at the exact same time, he'd stand in the middle of his cell, close his eyes, and smile. Guards said it was like he was waiting. For what? No one knew. Until one day, he disappeared. You heard that right. It was year 3 of his sentence. Routine transfer from Pelican Bay to a federal psych unit in Colorado. Mid-transport, something went wrong. GPS blinked off for 47 minutes. When the convoy pulled into the next checkpoint, Thorn was gone. 2 guards were found sedated in the back of the van. Not dead, just out cold. The driver had no memory. Said he blacked out after drinking coffee at the last stop. Security footage? What? No backup. The FBI called it an internal security breach. That was it. No updates. No press conference. No arrests. People started asking questions. Was it a breakout? The hit? Or was Thorn protected all along? One theory said he was relocated, that the government wanted his methods, that somewhere in a deep black site, Thorn was still running experiments. Another theory? That his network rescued him, because in the years following his arrest, more disappearances started happening. Not in California, but in Nevada, Arizona, Montana. Same pattern, low-income workers, vanishing with no trace. One girl, a 17-year-old from Reno, was last seen boarding a private shuttle to a wellness center. Sound familiar? The center was later shut down for zoning violations. No arrests were made, but locals said they heard screams in the woods, that trucks came in at night, that the land was owned, indirectly, by a shell corporation tied to the Greaves Foundation. It's like cutting off the head of a hydra. You think you stopped the monster, but all you did was make it grow new heads. Back in Marin, Jackie Rivera still keeps Emily close. They moved to a small town in Oregon. Quiet, off-grid, no social media. Emily paints now. Dark stuff. Rooms without doors. People with no eyes. Her therapist says it's healing. Jackie just nods. Pretends to believe it. But every time she locks the door at night, she checks it twice. Just in case. Because when someone takes away your control, your voice, your body, your mind, you don't just get that back. Not ever. And the truth is, there are more Charles Thorns out there. Maybe not with bunkers, but with power, influence, the ability to make people disappear without a sound. The scariest part? You probably passed one today. At the bank, at a fundraiser, on a dating app, smiling, shaking hands, wearing a suit that cost more than your rent. Because monsters aren't in shadows anymore. They're in plain sight. 6 months after the prison transfer fiasco, a body showed up in Oregon. Burnt, jaw wired shut, fingers removed, no ID. But the coroner found something bizarre embedded under the left armpit, an RFID chip. Military grade. Unregistered. They ran it through old databases. Nothing came up. Not Thorn. Not any known associate. But someone had gone through a hell of a lot of trouble to erase that person. The FBI wouldn't confirm if it was related, but locals swore it was one of Thorn's guards. Emily heard about it. She didn't speak for 3 days. See, trauma isn't just about what happened to you. It's about not knowing when it's really over. Because when the lights go out and you're alone with your thoughts, that part of your brain still thinks you're underground. Still thinks the walls are closing in. Still thinks the door won't open in the morning. She told Jackie once, late at night, in a whisper, that she still hears the soft hum of that speaker. Like he's still talking to her. Like he's inside her head. She said she wakes up smelling bleach. That sometimes, the sky doesn't look real anymore. That's what Charles Thorn took from them. Not just time. Not just safety. He took reality. Warped it. Bent it. Then let them loose in a world that no longer makes sense. And for some, that's worse than death. The DA tried to recover more of the bunker footage. Only fragments were salvageable. A few grainy clips. One showed Lucy curled up in the corner, whispering to herself. Another showed Andre pacing, eyes wild, reciting poems to stay sane. But one clip, one they never released, shook the entire prosecution team. It was of a birthday celebration. Charles stood in front of the speaker, wearing a party hat. He clapped his hands, sang the birthday song, then pushed a slice of cake through a sliding panel in Emily's cell. She didn't eat it, just stared, and he laughed. A deep, genuine belly laugh. Like it was all a game. The prosecutors said they watched that clip 5 times. Then threw up. People wanted justice. But justice has an expiration date. By the time the appeals ended, half the evidence had gone missing. The private server was never decrypted. Witnesses recanted. And then came the lawsuits, civil cases, not criminal. Marla, the estate manager, sued for wrongful death. She settled, disappeared to Costa Rica. Jeffrey, Thorne's assistant, declared mentally unfit for trial. Committed. Word is he still mutters Thorne's name during group therapy, saying he's preparing the next evolution. And Dr. Viola Kern? Never found. Some think she's dead. Others say she's operating under a new name. A blurry photo surfaced online last month. Someone who looked like her at an academic conference in Prague. The photo disappeared 24 hours later. Forum where it was posted? Shut down. The survivors tried to sue the Thorne estate. But most of the assets had been moved to offshore trusts. Ironclad. Years ahead. It was like he knew exactly how long he'd have, and used every second to seal himself away from consequences. That's the thing with real monsters. They plan. They watch. They build. But what they don't count on is memory. Because Emily remembers. Every detail. Every room. Every smell. Every scream. And she started painting it all. Not just as therapy, but as evidence. Her therapist helped compile the images into a digital archive. Then an investigative journalist picked up the story, ran it as a 6-part podcast. It went viral, millions of downloads. And suddenly, people cared again. Anonymous tips started pouring in. Coordinates, names, dates. A pattern emerged. Not just Thorne, but others, people who visited his estate. People who paid to observe. They found connections to wellness retreats in Eastern Europe, research compounds in Utah, even a mental conditioning lab in Malaysia. The dots were finally connecting. And then the journalist vanished. His car was found by a riverbed, keys still in the ignition, laptop gone. Cops said it was suicide. His wife said he was terrified the night before. Said he got a call from an unknown number, and all it said was, "You publish too much." Emily didn't cry. She just added another face to her mural. Her art became activism. Exhibits. Installations. The cells of silence, they called it. People walked through a replica of the bunker, heard real audio from the court tapes, saw the tally marks carved into the walls. It hit people hard. Some fainted. Some left crying. One mother dropped to her knees, saying it reminded her of her son, missing since 2019. Emily walked over, hugged her, and said, "Don't stop searching. They're still out there." Because that's the truth nobody wants to say out loud. We don't know how many there really were. Thorne kept no full list. Just initials. Vague notes. And every year, more people matched the pattern. Same background. Same vulnerabilities. Same disappearances. The case files keep growing. And yet, there's still no closure. No gravestones. No arrests. No final word. Just silence. And sometimes that's the scariest part. Because when people vanish quietly, they stop being real. They become ghosts. Data points. Case numbers. And the world forgets. But Emily won't. She made a promise. To herself, to the others, to the dead. She'll keep painting. Keep remembering. Keep dragging their names into the light until someone finally listens. Because monsters like Charles Thorne don't disappear. They adapt. They hide in systems. In foundations. In boardrooms. They wear kindness like a costume. And if no one's watching, they build new bunkers. Deeper, smarter, quieter. So yeah, check on your friends. Speak up about the weird stuff. Don't ignore the signs. Because the next thorn? He's already looking. You've been listening to Crimebot Chronicles. This was the story of Emily Rivera, the 23-year-old Filipino-American nursing student who escaped from Charles Thorne's hidden bunker. Nobody knew the truth until Emily's case. If this case hit you hard, share this episode. Someone out there needs to hear this. And maybe, just maybe, you might be helping someone avoid what Emily went through in a bit to get a job and survive. Make sure to hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and join us next time for another deep dive into true crime, where we uncover the stories that refuse to stay buried. Until then, stay safe, stay aware, and never stop asking questions.